I argued against all of this testing, vaccines, masks, lockdowns, shutting kids out of school, stopping people from visiting their grieving families, arresting people for sitting on a park bench, and I was cancelled. But everything I said at the time has now been proven to be true. We knew who the vulnerable were: people with comorbidities, the elderly, and Indigenous Australians in remote communities. The rest of Australia should have been allowed to get on with their lives. I've said before, and I'll say it again, Craig Kelly, the then federal member for Hughes, produced proof of the effectiveness of cheap drugs like ivermectin. He was vilified and called a foghorn of ignorance. Big Pharma had all the answers, didn't they, via vaccination? I don't think so. I've said all this before, but it must be said again. This is another millstone around the neck of the Albanese government, a Labor Party supposedly supporting the worker. To this day, we've never been told what the big pharmaceutical companies were paid, and no one in government or the opposition seems to care. The poor mug taxpayer was told that everything was free. Coronavirus tests were free. Vaccine 1 was free. Vaccine 2 was free. Booster 1, booster 2. And Big Pharma just kept counting the money. You and I to this day have been told nothing. I've told you before that in one of the many interviews I did, Craig Kelly cited an open letter from a raft of distinguished UK doctors to the Chief Executive of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in Britain that is responsible for ensuring that medicines and medical devices work and are acceptably safe. The letter of several pages expressed concern that the coercion... See, this is all happening at the beginning of this vaccination campaign. All this information was available and ignored. And indeed, Craig Kelly and others in Britain, they were cancelled. These pages expressed concern that the coercion being exercised to accept a certain medical treatment, namely vaccination, was against UK and international laws and declarations. In part, the letter said, and I quote, "No medical intervention should be introduced on a one-size-fits-all basis, but should be fully assessed for suitability, according to the characteristics of the age cohort and of the individuals concerned." Individuals concerned means people might say, "I don't want to be vaccinated." Well, it's fine. No, it's not. You won't be employed. This letter from eminent health professionals, deans of medicine, concluded, quote, "There is wisdom in the Hippocratic Oath which states, first, do no harm," the letter argued. "All medical interventions," it said, "carry a risk of harm. So we have a duty to act with caution and proportionality. This is particularly the case when considering mass intervention in a healthy population, in which situation there must be firm evidence of benefits far greater than harm," unquote. Now, I've quoted in the past one Dr. Jeffrey Barke, a board-certified primary care physician from Orange County in Southern California. He had personally treated multiple COVID-19 patients. None of them needed hospitalisation. None of them died. He argued that COVID-19, like any infection, was serious, but that people should not be afraid. But then he said this, quote, "As things now stand, we've reached a point where it is impossible to differentiate medical truth from medical fiction, health information from health misinformation." By the way, who was dishing all this out? Governments were involved in health misinformation. He said, "There has never been an organised effort to censor and completely shut down opinions that differ from the mainstream in the last 200 years of medical practice that is happening now." In other words, shut people up who disagreed. He went on, "Currently, any information that casts concern about one of the approved COVID-19 vaccinations is censored, and the source is accused of being anti-science, fear-mongering, publicity-seeking, or part of a fringe group to be shunned." I mean, I was accused of dopes in the media who would know nothing and have read nothing of being anti-vaccination. I've been vaccinated by choice ever since the age of 2. Now, of course, I must say here that those who did express concern have been proven to be right. In Queensland, under Dr. Jeanette Young, who's now been made governor, a doctor faced jail for administering hydroxychloroquine. As Dr. Barke said, and he was not alone, if a public presentation is made advocating hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, or even such supplements as vitamin D or zinc, the person's medical credentials are assaulted, unquote. I mentioned many times the distinguished Australian Professor Robert Clancy, along with Professor Thomas Borody. They cited Dr. Satoshi Omura, the 2015 Nobel Prize co-laureate for the discovery of ivermectin. And Professor Clancy and Borody argued, recently Dr. Omura and colleagues, in comprehensive studies on ivermectin activity against COVID-19, concluded that the preponderance of the evidence demonstrates such efficacy. Professor Clancy then made the point, on the matter of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, Craig Kelly has been right to raise awareness about these drugs and their potential to be effective in the early treatment of the disease. He then said, Professor Clancy, quote, as an immunologist, I am an expert, and I believe my opinions need some clear air, unquote. Well, I say again, of the attacks on Craig Kelly, Professor Clancy said, it's very sad when people start dragging the guy apart. It is bad enough when you drag someone apart on facts, but if you do it without facts or understanding what the argument is, it's disappointing, unquote. Well, Craig Kelly was cancelled, as you know, vilified and defamed. His career was ruined, which is why people have clamoured for a royal commission. What do we get? Nothing but an inquiry. States are exempt, but they were the ones who issued these dictatorial orders. On the whole coronavirus response, we've been grossly deceived and damagingly misled. We don't have a royal commission because governments of all persuasions were led by the nose. As a result, thousands of people have lost their lives, estimated at 20,000 who could have been saved. But businesses have been destroyed, billions of dollars wasted. Many are living but suffering long-term related injuries via either long COVID or the misinformation of governments and bureaucrats. People have been denied access to the life-saving ivermectin, but other people are still suffering because they've lost their jobs for being unvaccinated. When I spoke on this program a couple of weeks ago to Jo Nova, she argued this was the biggest medical scandal since 1850. Why a cheap, safe drug was actively suppressed because it threatened the emergency use authorisations for all experimental vaccines, an industry worth about $100 billion. But now, of course, when it's all over and Big Pharma have got their money, the Therapeutic Goods Administration says ivermectin is okay, which we said at the outset. Big Pharma have taken their money. Others have lost their jobs for not being vaccinated and are still denied employment.